Hello and welcome to the video. I do apologize ahead of time if the audio quality isn't great with this recording. I have construction work going on next door, so I do apologize. This tale is titled An Honest Thief. It is the fourth in a 6-part series. If you have missed the previous story, consider going back and watching Princess and Her Dog. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or comment any feedback you may have, or consider subscribing as there will be more tales to come. It was a perfect night, with only a few clouds covering the bright moon, and no rain. The air was frigid, and plumes of hot breath were billowing out of Artair's mouth as he ran silently along the tiled roof. At this late hour, the only people around were the city guards patrolling the streets, and the odd drunkard looking for a place to pass out for the night. Artair was a short man, with close-cropped black hair and stubble for a beard. He had deep blue eyes that almost shone in the dark, and he wore black leather armour that had the appearance of simple garb, but was in fact tough enough to turn a blade if set to the right angle. His soft leather boots made him almost silent as he padded across the rooftop. Beneath his dark grey cloak and hood, he had concealed in leather pouches about his body all the equipment required to be a highly skilled thief in the capital city, Arun High. Arun High, or simply Arun as the locals called it, was 4 times larger than any other city in the kingdom and 10 times the population. The eastern quarter was next to a wide bay that had an easily defensible mouth and butted up against the city. The massive port held over 100 berths, and ships came and went constantly. There were 3 enormous concentric walls segmenting the city, each having a north, south, east and west gate for ease of movement. Buildings in the outer city consisted of 1 and 2 stories, but reached up to 5 in the city proper. The tallest structures were that of the palace, which was located roughly in the centre of the city. The closer one was to the palace, the steeper and more pointed the roofs were, emphasizing their height even more than the buildings themselves. Artair always felt alive when he was working a job, and this was an easy one. Get into the private tower apartment and make his way down to the office and snatch a specific bundle of parchment. Anything else of value he could take and keep for himself. He hadn't had a more straightforward job in years. Everything was laid out for him, even down to the floor plan of the apartment and the descriptors of the parchment. He was comfortable traversing the rooftops, alleyways and subterranean sewers of Arun. It was more exhilarating to him than fear-inducing, even though he often found himself 4 or 5 stories above the street below, or walking in complete darkness through the city's muck. But that never bothered Artair. He had grown up on these streets, and getting from one part of the city to the other unnoticed was just a way of life. Artair had been raised to be a thief. Very few street urchins grew to adulthood in that life. Only those who were truly gifted and lucky prospered. Thieves who were caught were either sent off to work camps, or for the most unfortunate souls, there were the night cells. There, a person would be tossed into a dark, claustrophobic room and forgotten about, until exposure or lack of water killed them. He couldn't think about that now. He had to focus on the job at hand. His journey had taken him all the way up to the group of apartments nearest the royal palace. Whoever the mark happened to be, they were certainly a bigwig. These apartments were reserved for Arun's most self-important and snobbish persons. He might as well be stealing from the king himself. As promised by the client, the top right window on the tallest tower was open, probably to let cool night air in with a sense of security, as the window couldn't possibly be reached. But Artair wasn't your run-of-the-mill thief. From one of his larger pouches, he drew a small, foldable grappling hook, a masterfully crafted piece of iron and steel. He attached one end of a rope that was coiled over his shoulder to the hook and uncoiled the rest. With a few practice swings, he launched the grappling hook up the 2 additional stories the tower provided over its neighbouring rooftops. Once the hook left his hand, he stretched out his fingers and traced its path through the air. With a flick of his hand, the airborne hook shot left and into the open window. Once the hook had passed out of sight, he closed his hand into a fist and gave the rope a soft tug. That should do it," he said under his breath, as he stretched his back and shoulders and prepared to climb, ascending the rope in less than a minute. Having done this sort of thing many times before, he paused on the sill and pulled up his rope. Once inside the window frame, he perched there for a moment and allowed his eyes to adjust to the almost pitch-black room. The chamber looked like a library mixed with a laboratory. Not wasting any precious time to conceptualize what his mark did for a living, Arter entered the room and softly made his way down 2 flights of stairs. From the outside, the door seemed to lead to a regular office, but upon opening it, he was confronted by odd metal objects that looked like beds, but were curved upward in an unsettling fashion. More concerningly, there were dozens of shackles strewn around the place. Not wanting to overstay his welcome, he began searching the desk in the middle of the room for the rolls of parchment his client required. While sifting through the paperwork, he grabbed a number of items for himself. A large ring, a few silver trinkets that were on the desk, a small but expensive statue that was being used as a paperweight, and a number of other knickknacks his keen eye perceived to be valuable. All of these he deftly sorted into different pouches based on size and value, without breaking stride as he searched for the papers. After only a few minutes, he had collected enough in coin to call this job a success, and he had found the papers he had been after. Just as he began rolling them up into a leather sleeve, he heard something from the floor above and froze. Looking about the room to see if he could find a hiding place, and to gauge whether this room's window would open, he heard what sounded like footsteps. They were coming down the stairs, which made him guess that one of the rooms above must be a bedroom. Not panicking yet, he decided that the window was his best option. He deftly ran his fingers around the window's edges, as there was no obvious latch, only hinges to indicate that this window should in fact open. Finding a button underneath the window frame, he pressed it just as the office door swung open behind him and jumped through. Whoever the mark was certainly didn't get a look at his face, and might not have even noticed his cloak slipping through the gap. He dropped onto the roof below, quickly and silently. Not daring to look back, he attached his hook to the gutter of the roof and swung himself down to street level in one swift motion. Landing gracefully on the cobbled street below, he raised his arm toward the hook. He opened his hand and the gesture caused the hook to detach and fly down toward him. Catching it in midair, he tucked it away under his cloak. As he walked through the streets nonchalantly, Arter noticed the flickering light of multiple torches approaching around the next bend. Stepping into an alley, he heard a cacophony of bells ring out. The mark must have called the city guard, but it wasn't just one that had arrived. It seemed the entire section had been summoned. Whoever it was must have been a big shot indeed to draw the entire city guard to them at will. No matter. Arter's contact wasn't far off, and the meeting time was nearly upon him. He would be relieved of the papers, then he could go straight to his fence to unload the goods. Dodging his way through the streets as guards trundled this way and that in search of anyone they could lay their hands on, he reached his destination without issue. He had only been in the dark stables for a few moments when a cloaked figure darted around the corner. "Did you get them? The entire city guard is on high alert. What went wrong?" "Yes, I got them," Arter said, as he handed the leather sleeve over to the hooded man. "And nothing went wrong. This mark of yours simply woke up and noticed he'd been robbed at the very moment I was on my way here. Usually I don't care who the mark is, as long as they aren't a decent person. But this guy sure has some power. Well, you might think you got away scot-free, but I overheard one of the guards describe you down to the scruff on your chin. Face it, mate, you were made." Without ceremony, the man walked to the edge of the stable and peered into the street nervously. Artair walked over and pulled the man back into the darkness. With a poor attempt at bravado, Artair responded, "I've never been made, and tonight is no exception. I don't believe it. I was out of the window before the door was even open. Believe what you want. I'm out of here. Pleasure doing business with you." And with that, the hooded man was out of sight. If somehow Artair really was made, he couldn't go to his usual haunts. He was well known in those parts, and although he was on good terms with most of the people he associated with, he knew there were some who would give him up for a fee to satisfy a grudge. Feeling more stuck than he had in a long time, he made his way to the rooftop of the nearest building, just to be on the safe side. After pacing up and down for a short while, he begrudgingly accepted that he had only one option available now. Artair travelled the short distance to an older, more run-down district of the upper city, and stalked onto a roof of a familiar apartment. Opening one of the wooden shutters that covered a top-story window, he slipped inside. Stepping quietly across the attic room, he slid down the ladder and turned, only to come face to face with the point of a sword. "You picked the wrong house, thief!" The man holding the sword trailed off as he held a candle toward Artair. "By all the gods, I nearly killed you!" With a grunt and a smile, he lowered the sword, and the two men embraced. "What in the hells are you doing here?" "Well, I got myself in a spot of trouble, and I knew I couldn't go home, so I came here." The other man gave him a put-out look, but Artair quickly continued. "It will only be for a day or two, I promise. I just need to wait till the gates aren't being watched so closely, and I'll be out of your hair. Besides, where better to hide than the home of the illustrious Commander of the Guard, Anan the Bold?" Taking no notice of the sarcastic compliment, Anan asked more seriously, "What kind of trouble have you found yourself in this time? You know, one day you're going to get us both in deep water. I'll be put to the sword as your accomplice. Mark my words, I'll haunt you from the afterlife if you mess up what I've worked so hard to build here." Starting to pace around the room, Artair slipped in even more levity. Yes, your sensibility is admirable, and you have helped the common folk on your quest to become Arun's most pompous guard commander, but there is no way they could have followed me here. You never gave me enough credit, even when we were children. Anan pursed his lips. "You know I still don't approve of the way you waste your talents on base thievery." "There is nothing base about what I do, my dear friend. Did the streets teach you nothing as a child? This city isn't fair, and our common brethren get the short end of a very long stick. I just help even the odds a little," Artair said with a shrug. Now it was Anan's turn for mirth. "Oh, don't worry, I've seen my fair share of horse dung on this side of the fence too. Look, I don't want to have the same argument with you again. I heard the watch bells. That's how I came to be awake before you even got here. What in the hells is going on?" Artair threw his hands up dismissively. "I had a simple job go wrong, and somehow someone got a look at me, although the how escapes me for the present. Regardless, they got a description of me to the guard, which is why I had to come here. It will blow over in a day or two, like I said. Then I'll be out of your hair, so don't worry." Anan's tone shifted back to serious as he rubbed his chin. "And no one got a look at you. You're certain?" "Yes, certain. Hold on a moment, will you?" Gesturing with his hand for Artair to stop pacing, Anan started to rummage through his guard uniform, which was hanging on a coat hook beside the door. "Here we go," he said, as he pulled out of a coat pocket a small object that looked like an ornate hourglass. "Knowing you swiped a few things for yourself on this job, am I right?" Artair shrugged. "Well, I've got to feed myself, don't I? Besides, this mark clearly had enough to spare." "You never think things through, do you?" Anan said, as he waved the object over Artair's body. As it passed over a pouch at his waist, the hourglass began to visibly vibrate while humming softly. "You ought to be more careful. Every knuckle-dragging guard carries one of these to detect magical objects. I bet whatever's in your pocket has some kind of magical enchantment that is given whomever you stole it off a complete view of what you look like, and they'll probably be able to track you with it. We have trouble with black market objects similar to this all the time." As Anand finished his sentence, there came a loud banging on the door, followed by a call. "Commander, are you in there? We have urgent need of you right away." With feigned grogginess, Anand called back. I'll be right out. Just give me a minute to put my bloody trousers on." Turning to Arter, Anand said through clenched teeth, "Get your foolish ass up into the attic and throw away that stupid bauble before we both hang for it." "Will you be alright? I can't believe I've brought this down on your head," Arter said, concern hardening his expression. "Don't worry. It'll just mean a sleepless night for me and a few questions. You owe me big time for this." With that, Anand quickly put on his uniform and waited for Arter to get up into the attic before opening the door. The 4 city guards that were waiting pushed their way in once the door was opened just a crack. "What is the meaning of this, Constable Gilbert? I told you I was on my way out, and you dare budge into my home. Where's the bloody fire that you would disturb me on one of my few nights off?" Grinning a malicious smile, the short and dull-witted constable enjoyed what he was about to say. "My apologies, Commander, but I had strict orders from the High Channeler himself. We had to take yous into custody and deliver yous to his private apartments for questioning." Anand tried with all his might not to look up into the rafters and kill Arter with his gaze. He took a deep breath and went on, faking confusion. "The High Channeler? What the bloody hell does the Royal Channeler himself want with me at this hour?" "I dunno, sir, but he said if I did my job correctly, that I might have a shot at yours, if I was lucky." Hidden in the attic, Arter screwed up his face and rubbed at his forehead. He didn't want to abandon Anand, but he knew that if he didn't get out now, he might lose his chance. He made his way out onto the rooftop, beside himself with anger and too frustrated to keep the words from pouring out of his mouth. "Of course, you fool. All the equipment and gadgets. Of course there would be a magical tracking device. And now? Half the guards in the city are up and about. You bloody fool." He discarded all of the stolen objects in a barrel behind the commander's apartment, thinking at least that way Anand would have some plausible deniability when it came to his questioning. Arter made his way back up to the rooftops and followed the 4 guards, which quickly became 8, along the road that led back to the upper districts of the city. They reached the building Arter had stolen from earlier that evening, and the guards took Anand into the base of the tower, then left without him a moment later. After circling around the rooftops to get a view of all the possible entry points, Arter sat on his haunches with his head in his hands. All the windows were shut, and aside from the front door, there was no other way into the tower. It was nearly daybreak when the very same window Arter had fled from earlier that night swung open. From his rooftop, he could see directly into the room beyond. There was Anand, bound and shackled to one of the metal beds. He was shirtless, and to Arter's horror, countless red lines had been slashed across his body. The commander was limp in his restraints. "That bastard! I'll kill him," Arter said through clenched teeth. Pulling a concealed dagger from beneath his cloak, he walked to the peak of the roof he was perched on and prepared himself. The space between the rooftop and the tower window was further than any normal man could jump. But Arter wasn't a normal man after all. Crouching down with the blade in his teeth, he launched himself into a run. He dashed across the rooftop and propelled himself into the open air. Once he hit the height of his leap, he struck out his hands in front of him and pulled them back through the air. This made him accelerate as though a strong gust of wind had propelled him, giving him the extra thrust needed to reach the tower's lower window. Without breaking stride, Arter landed on the sill with one foot and pitched himself forward, attempting to jump across the room and land right in front of the constrained man. His plan was foiled the second his foot touched the sill. His body froze in place, as if in a state of rigor mortis. Everything but his eyes tensed as he was perched in an excruciating pose. A trickle of blood ran from each corner of his mouth where he bit down on the blade. The commander roused by the sound of Artair's arrival, looked towards the window, eyes wide. "No, you fool," whispered Anan, as a tall, slender man with white hair and bright green eyes stepped out of the shadows and walked towards Artair, one arm raised. The man wore an ornate robe that covered his body from head to toe. He had an angular, sunken face with a long, thin nose, from which he was looking down at the frozen thief. In a lofty tone, the man addressed Artair. "I've been expecting you, my sticky-fingered friend. You're far more nimble than any thief I've ever given credit to. How exactly did you get into my tower in the first place? What's that? Cat got your tongue?" The High Channeler of Arundel chuckled to himself. "Never mind. It is all immaterial at this point. I can see you don't have my scrolls with you, which is a real pity." The slender man paced around the room, his steps so smooth that he seemed to hover from one side of the study to the other. He paused to stroke Artair's chin tauntingly before he continued. "That's going to cost you dearly, I'm afraid. And as for whom you're working for, now that's going to have to wait. A little time in the night cells should loosen you up a bit." At the mention of the night cells, Artair's eyes started to dart around the room frantically, in search of anything that could help him. His attempt was in vain, as the magic that gripped him was stronger than anything he had ever seen or experienced. Sensing his despair, Anan lifted his head and looked up at Artair. With great pain, he coughed out words of comfort. "Don't worry, it's gonna be all..." Before he could finish the last word, the High Channeler swept over him. To Artair's despair, he noticed a glint of steel in the Channeler's hand, and in one fluid motion, the man slit Anan's throat from ear to ear. Blood spurted into the air and began to gush down Anan's chest as he choked and gurgled. Finally, his gaze widened in a horrific plea for help as he looked right into Artair's eyes. The commander's eyes lost focus and his body drooped, held up only by the shackles. "Pity. Pity you didn't have those papers with you, my boy. I do hate to waste talented people's lives, but it is what it is. I'll be seeing you soon." With that, the High Channeler gestured with his arm toward the open window, and Artair's frozen body slowly floated out through the opening and into free space. With a flick of the Channeler's fingers, Artair's body immediately unfroze and he plummeted down. The spell may have broken, but his limbs were still so stiff that he was unable to break his fall, and after a 2-story descent, he hit the cobblestones hard. Blood sprayed out of his mouth and nose, as all the oxygen in his lungs was expelled with the force of the impact. Artair made a wheezing sound as he tried to inhale, his body clinging to life. 3 guards, having seen the fall, came running over and knelt at his side. "Leave him," the High Channeler said, emerging only a moment later from the tower's front door and crouching by the twitching body. The High Channeler placed a hand on Artair's back, and a small light began to emanate from his outstretched palm. A rattling gasp turned into a full breath, and Artair's chest began to rise and fall again. "That will be enough to keep you alive, at least for now." Getting to his feet, the High Channeler addressed the guards. "Take him and throw him in a night cell. But remember which one, mark you. I still need this pup, so don't you dare forget where you put him, or you will share his fate. Got that?"
"Sir, yes, sir,"
said the 3 guards in unison. Then they grabbed Artair's shoulders and dragged him away, tears running down his face. The end. This was a Tallow Tale. Thanks for watching.